Aloha, and I'd like to welcome you to our first technical introduction module on Web User Interface Basics. What we're going to do today is take a look at the basics of HTML, and we're not going to learn all the intricacies of all the different kinds of markup tags that you can use, but just sort of get the basic structure and a feel for what it looks like. And then you're going to go on your own and go through a tutorial to learn a little more in depth. Now fortunately we're not going to have to do too many advanced HTML kinds of things. If we have to do anything very sophisticated, we'll use an editor or a framework to develop it for us. But you do need to know how to manually manipulate HTML if you're going to be successful in developing web applications. You'll see later on this is especially important when we're developing forms that will be processed using PHP. So we're going to look at the basics of HTML, understand the doc type and some common tags, and maybe look at div and span. We're also going to take a look at sort of what CSS is, cascading style sheets, and take a quick example of changing the style that manages what the page looks like in HTML through cascading style sheets. Again, the more advanced stuff you're going to have to learn through a tutorial after you go through this introduction. We're also going to take a look at building a web page in HTML5 using NetBeans, and how that integrated development environment is very useful for developing web pages, and then of course later on we'll extend this to building web applications using PHP. But today we're just going to look at web pages. We'll also look at some web page development tools. In particular, we're going to look at the Chrome Web Developer Tools. Now, there's pretty much every browser has its own web developer tool that allows you to look at more detail at a particular web page and do some work with it, but we're just going to use Chrome just because it's very common, it's freely available, and it's not that much different than anything else. For example, you might have heard of Firebug on Netscape's Firefox, but rather than try to do an example for every different one, we'll just standardize on Chrome. If you want to use something else on your own, that's fine, but we'll just give you an example using this. And then of course make use of Google Fonts. Now that's what's going to be in this module. We're not going to look at Google Fonts. That's something you'll learn on your own through a tutorial. So what we'll do is we'll introduce HTML, cascading style sheets in NetBeans, and then we'll test it using a local web server, and then we'll look at the Google Chrome tool, and on your own you'll go through the NetBeans tutorial further to understand a little bit more how to build pages and use NetBeans, because there's a lot of very, very useful tools in there. And you'll go through a beginning and intermediate HTML tutorial, look through CSS tutorial, learn about Google Web Fonts, and then have a Chrome Dev Tools tutorial. Now again, I don't expect you to become an expert at any of these things, but you do need to be familiar enough where you can make good use of them during this class. Before you start this module, and if you're going to be following along with me in this module, you need to make sure that you have XAMPP installed and it's tested with Apache as a local web server. That means that, like as we did in class, you're able to perhaps get the PHP info or Hello World or something like that, not only running through NetBeans, but directly through the Apache web browser independent of NetBeans. You should have NetBeans 8.0 installed. You want to have the version with PHP and HTML5. If you downloaded the everything version, that's okay too. It just has a lot more stuff in it that we're probably not going to look at. And you need to have the Google Chrome browser. You'll also have to have the Google Chrome extension for NetBeans, but that will automatically be asked for if you don't have it. We'll take a look at that when we get started. Okay, so let's get going at that. So the first thing to do is let's open up NetBeans. And I'm going to do this on a PC today. Some other times I might do it on the Mac for you. But there's not much difference between one and the other. So we have NetBeans running here. And let's see. What we want to do is start a new project. And you'll see that we have PHP samples and HTML5. If you have more different kinds of projects, that's okay. Just go find HTML5, and we want HTML5 application. Hit next. And again, the project name, let's just call this hello underscore world. Now you could just say hello space world, but occasionally the space will cause difficulties when translating from one machine to another, or if you're trying to pass that name, sometimes spaces cause problems. So kind of conventionally we put an underscore if we really want a space there. The project location you see should be c:/ZAMP/htdocs. I guess in this case, and the project folder says ZAMP htdocs hello world. So in this case, NetBeans is going to create the hello world directory in htdocs in the ZAMP application folder. Now on the Mac, it's going to be slightly different. On the Mac, it's going to be applications ZAMP htdocs. Okay, so you want to make sure it's in the right place. Now you may have to browse and go find that htdocs folder. Make sure you find the correct htdocs folder, just like we did in class, because if you don't put it in the htdocs folder, then our Apache web server will not be able to find the files and run it directly. And you can always copy them over, but that becomes a little bit more of a hassle. So we click next, and you see there's a whole bunch of other things. There's like templates that you could use and different online templates that you can use. We're going to skip that for now. When you get a little more advanced, you can look at those. And then later on, there's this idea about loading JavaScript files and frameworks. We're probably going to do a couple of these later on, but right now we're just going to hit finish, and it's starting everything up. Good. And you'll see that we have hello world here, site root, which is going to, of course, be the htdocs /hello underscore world folder in the ZAMP directory. Okay, so that's going to be our document root. And you'll see that NetBeans was very nice and created a bit of a starter template for us. And this is sort of a basic HTML page. So one thing that you want to notice is that the file name is .html. You can also use .htm, but by convention, when you have something that has .htm or .html, then when it's served up by the web server, it's just going to take all the text in here and pass it directly through to whoever requested it. And that's usually a browser. So if I'm using Chrome, Chrome might hit my web server, ask for index.html, and it'll pass all this text directly into the browser, which then will interpret these HTML tags and place the appropriate make the appropriate rendering of that on the page. Rendering means the picture of what you'll see. So that's the first thing to realize. And of course, we learned in class that index is a special name that if you don't use a file name in a directory, it'll look for index.htm or .html as the file to load. Okay, more on that a little bit later. Now the first thing you'll see is that NetBeans in our directory here, that NetBeans in our template put doc type HTML, and that's just sort of a directive that says that what document type this is. So it's going to be an HTML commands in here. The other thing it put is a comment. So anything that starts with a lesson, exclamation, minus, minus, and then from there until it gets the begin, that's the opening tag or the begin tag, until it gets to the end tag or the close tag, minus, minus, greater than, is going to be considered a comment, and it's going to be ignored by the browser. The browser will not render this, it'll just pass it right through, it won't put it on the screen. Next thing you see, of course, is that it starts with the HTML tag. And you'll notice that NetBeans does some nice things. If you click on a tag, not only does it highlight it, it'll also show you if it's an open tag, it recognizes all of this as HTML, and it will find the close tag, which is this /HTML. So it's quite common in HTML to have an open tag, and then the same name will be closed by you putting a backslash in front of it. You notice that the comment is a little bit different. The comment doesn't have that convention. It's one thing that breaks that. You'll see we have another thing, head here, and it says /head, and that stands for the header. And we have body and the closed body. So things in HTML tend to be between tags, between an open and closed tag, saying that in between here is what this tag will be operating on. Now, so you'll also see we have a title tag, which that'll make a title for the page. So that'll appear on the page. You'll see in the window, And then meta tags. Meta tags, you notice it doesn't have a close tag. It just says meta, and then it's open, has something in here, and then a close of the tag itself. And meta stands for metadata. And here, this is a variable or an attribute, actually, an attribute where it says charset equals, quote, UTF minus 8, close quote. Okay, and so this is just an attribute for this meta tag. And the meta tag basically is just a way of passing information into whatever the browser or something that's using it. Sometimes they have actions, sometimes they don't, but they're not typically display elements. Head means that this is at the top. This is the head of your page. It's typically things that don't get rendered, except for the title will get rendered as part of the window. So here in the head section, we'll put things like titles, metadata, and we might put directives to load style sheets or imports and links and things like that. Okay, body, of course, is where the main body of a document or your page is going to be located. So you put most of your main text in between here. And then we have a div tag, which just stands for a division or just a section. It actually doesn't really do anything. It just groups this stuff between the beginning and opening tag as a section. And you can, later on, you'll see that this is useful because you can give it an ID, which you can refer to that section and then manipulate it as an object, or you can style it with some style stuff, or you can do a variety of different things to it as a section. So it just designates that this is a grouped bunch of text. So it doesn't actually do anything to the screen. Okay, so you'll notice that NetBeans has some useful things. Again, they got the project browser here. It puts the index.html, and you'll see that since it knows that it's an HTML file, it actually has a little navigator, and this navigates the domain browser, the HTML tag taxonomy. And you'll see that it starts with HTML, and embedded in there there's head, and then there's inside there's meta and titles, and then there's this body tag. And you can see you can collapse these things if you want and make it a little simpler. You can see that everything is between the tag. This is sort of the XML format, and you can see that when things are inside or nested in one another, the convention is to indent it. See how HTML is over here to the left, and then head is to the right, and these things are to the right even more, right? This indentation means that it is nested or it's inside it, and of course that's respected here. Of course, if you can see that it doesn't really matter. HTML actually doesn't care. And if you do this, you'll see that it doesn't change actually the embedding. It has to do with what is in between. So these things are in between the head, the open head, and the closed head, therefore they're nested in it. Okay, but by convention it makes it a little easier to read if you just indent things to the right to show that these things are inside. You'll notice that NetBeans does quite a number of useful things for you to help you make your HTML clean and correct. So let's just try something. Let's just take this to-do write content. Let's make this just say hello world here. And then if we save it, we now have modified this page. Now let's go take a look at it. Now if you have things set up correctly, you should be able to run the project. But now you see that to do this I need to install the Chrome extension. I didn't install the Chrome extension, so I can go to the Chrome store, and I'm going to go download and install this. I'm going to add that in. So maybe you already did this. Maybe you didn't. And then you can close that. And we can go back to what we did. Now rerun the project. And bammo. See, it says hello world right there. Okay. So that's nice. Let's go back to let's go back to our project here. I'll make this a little smaller. Move this over here, like so. And you notice this says NetBeans connector is debugging this now. Now, of course, you can do this without it. I'm going to go make my NetBeans a little smaller here. Let's see if we can look at both of these windows at the same time. put this up here. Move this down here. There. Just organizing things so I can see things a little better. I should actually be recording both screens, but I think that's a little too much. Okay, so moving along, you'll see another thing I can do. Let's just add to this. We'll add another tag here, the paragraph tag, like this. And you notice that NetBeans does something nice. As I start to type the tag, it starts to look at what possibly things I might want. And you'll see that it gives me a list of a variety of different things. And in this case, I want the paragraph tag. So I can just click on that, and it'll move it over for me. And also, if I mouse over it, you can see it tells me some useful things about the tag, the p tag, like this. And if I close the p tag like this, it's going to highlight it and remind me that I need a close paragraph tag. And if I hit enter, it's going to put that in there and move the cursor in between, and that'll keep me from mistakenly leaving it out. Actually, it turns out that you don't need the close tag for the paragraph one, but now the p tag will create a new paragraph, and we'll see what that does. I'll say this is Dan here, and then I'm going to save that, and then you notice that I have the NetBeans connector running, and it automatically refreshed it and showed me that the update of that page. That's the useful thing about having NetBeans connector. Okay, it auto refreshes it for you. Now let's just take a little check. You see that it says localhost 8383/hello world index.html. Now this is running it through the NetBeans connector. That's why it has this port 8383. But there's nothing stopping us because we saved our file in the htdocs directory. There's nothing stopping us from doing this manually. So let's just open up a new tab over here, and I type localhost. Okay, and you'll see that it says web page is not available. And the reason why that is because I was using the NetBeans web server. What I want to do now is use Apache, because that's really what's going to run my web page eventually. So I don't have Apache running. So what I need to do is go over and start XAMPP up. Okay, so I open up the XAMPP control panel here. And remember that it's going to be different on the Mac. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to look a little bit like this. And you see that if I have it running as a service, it'll all be running. But it should have a little green ball here. If not, I'm going to start it up and see how it's green here. On the Mac, there'll be a little green ball. And if it's green, you've got it running. That's good. You can minimize that. And now we can do a reload. And there, we have XAMPP running. Now that we have XAMPP, not just XAMPP running, in particular the Apache web server, we know that in the htdocs directory I have hello world. Okay, and if I hit hello world, things like it's put this in the public HTML directory. Okay, looks like something in my configuration it automatically put it in the public HTML directory. Yours might not. Yours might be in the htdocs directory, not public HTML. But mine was in public HTML for some reason, and there it is. So localhost, hello world, public HTML. I think when you create a HTML5 project in NetBeans, it puts everything into a public HTML directory. That way it'll separate the HTML or the web files from other things. Again, later on, we may vary that by not saving things into the public HTML file. But the important thing is that it's in the Hello World directory. And in the Hello World directory, there was another directory that had my files in it. And in particular, I didn't put anything in there. So this is actually looking by default for index.html. If I hit like that, there it is. If I looked for another one, let's say I looked for index with a bunch of extra X's, you see it says object not found. Okay, so it's just showing that it found the default. Okay, oops, let's see, go back to index. There. Okay. All right, that's just showing that we can run that directly. Let's just verify that those files are there. I'm going to go over to here, to computer, this, XAMPP, and I go to, where's my htdocs? And in htdocs, I have my hello world. Here it is. And in hello world, this has all my NetBeans project stuff, which some of the things I don't need. That's why NetBeans will ask you if you want to separate these things. But I'll go into public HTML, and there's index.html, and that's my file. Okay. Let's go back to using NetBeans Connector, because NetBeans Connector makes things pretty nice. Okay. Now you'll notice that when I did this run and got the NetBeans Connector, that it had some other fun things, like has a network monitor here, which tells me what the actual HTTP commands were. So it was actually running some HTTP commands. And we'll learn a little bit more about that later. And if there's any sort of output or errors, it'll put it there. It also, notice it put up the cascading style sheets. None were selected, and there's no rule selected. So let's actually add a style sheet, a CSS style sheet. So what we might want to do is, you see that these are pretty plain. What a cascading style sheet will allow us to do is to style these different elements on the page based on what kind of element they are. So this element here, we have a body element. So everything in here is the body element, and we're going to now create a style to say that anything in the body maybe should be colored red. So we'll go like this, new file, and we're going to go click on other, actually on HTML5, and it says cascading style sheet. We're going to click cascading style sheet, or CSS. Okay, you can go to next, and let's just give it a name. Let's just call it, I don't know, hello world.css. It's in the project here. You notice that it's going to put it in public HTML, hello world, and notice it says .css. So this is not going to be an HTML file. It's going to be a cascading style sheet. Okay, and notice it added that for me here, and in how it put the, let's make that a little bit bigger. There. And you can see it put a nice little template for the hello world cascading style sheet. So we're going to now put what is known as the style here, or a rule, a style rule. And so a style rule starts out with what element we're going to style. So we'll say body. And you notice that when I do this, also NetBeans is still going to try to help me. It tells me the various different things that can actually, let's see what happens. I can see what kinds of things start with B. Whoops. B, and then what things that I can do outside of B. See, here's body. And I can hit enter, and it'll do that, autocomplete it for me. Okay, and then I can put my styles in between these delimiters here, and I'll just make that look nicer. Notice when I hit enter how it automatically splits this up to put it here and here, which is really nice. It also puts the beginning delimiter and the end delimiter in, so I don't forget to close it, which could cause some problems. So this is going to say for every body element, I'm going to add the rule that the color, and notice that it comes up if I start to type color, NetBeans said, oh, you must want the color attribute, and it tells me all the different things you can do with that, which is kind of nice, even the different browsers that support it, which is very nice. Okay. Hit enter. If I hit enter, it auto-completes, and notice I put this colon here, which says color, which is the attribute that I want to modify for the rule, and then colon, what rule do I want? I'm going to say, let's say red. And notice I type R, and it puts up all the things that are R. Let's just double click on that, and it goes red. Now look at this. Notice that in the body properties, it says that body, the element body, now has the rule red associated with it. So it shows you everything that's in there, and you always end these things with a semicolon. Okay, now if I hit save like this, I go over here and I run it, and it should have given me now, so you notice that it didn't do anything. So what happened is I created the style sheet. It says this is what the property is. Now what I need to do is I need to connect it. I need to connect it up with my page. Okay, so I go back to my page here, and I'm going to do this. Usually you want to do this in the head. So I'm going to go, let's go after here like this, and you're going to link the style sheet to your page by using the link. And see, there it is with link. Okay, and I can double click on that. Actually, let's see what happens. If If I do this and I type link and I hit enter. Okay, good. So link, and then you say what is the link relationship. So you say rel, and then notice that I say rel equals, and as soon as I did that, it put the quotes in. And by the way, quotes typically group things together. So if you end up using extra spaces or things like that, that in HTML tends to ignore spaces and carriage returns. So if you put spaces in there, or special characters, you're going to need to put things in between double quotes or single quotes so it groups it together. It knows that this is what I want. So in this case, I actually don't really need it because there's only one thing here. It just says, it's just one word, style sheet. So I'm just going to say style sheet. Okay, so I'm linking this in as a style sheet. And now the next thing I want to do is I want to choose what type. And you'll actually see that it gives me a list of other attributes I can choose. I'll just go pick it down here. Here's type. And then notice it put the equals and the double quotes again. This is going to be text / cascading style sheets. Okay, good. And now the other thing I need to do is give it a hyperlink reference. So I'll slide down here, and I can always type these things by hand, but NetBeans makes it convenient by finding it for the list, double-clicking it. That way you won't make a mistake. Now the href is the name of the file that you're referencing, so you have to give it the path. Now it can be an absolute path or the relative path. Now since both hello world and index are in the same directory, all I need to do is give it the style sheet name. So this is HELLO world.css. Okay. And notice it has a little warning here. Why is it warning? It says that I didn't close this link. Okay, so I need to close that link here. There. And now my warning goes away, and it looks like my link is good. So now watch what happens when I save it. Bam! And you notice that over here, everything turned red. So why did it turn red? It turned red because I created a style sheet, Hello World Cascading Style Sheet, who says that all body elements should have the rule that they're colored, the style that they're colored red, or the attribute that they're red. And if you notice over here in the body tag, all this stuff is in the body element. So anything in here is going to have the color red attribute applied to it, and that happens to be all these things in here. Okay, so maybe that's not what we want. Maybe we want only the hello world to be red. Maybe we want things that are within a paragraph to be blue. So what we can do is go back to our hello world style sheet here, and we can add another rule. And we can say, okay, paragraph elements, okay, are going to be color, and we'll make them blue. Like that. And then I hit save. And you notice as soon as I did that, it automatically updated, and here now it says hello world is red and the paragraph is blue. And you notice this is cascading, meaning that one thing inside another. There was a rule that said that everything in the body should be red, but the paragraph is something that's inside that body, and it overrode what the body rule was. And let's take a look at how we can see what that is. And you'll notice that this thing called the browser DOM shows me all the different things that are in there. This is kind of nice too. And we'll take a look at this. This is using Chrome tools, but if I mouse over these things like this, you see how it's showing you what element is on the page. So HTML, this is what's in the HTML. The head you can't see. This is what's in the body. This is what's in the div. If I opened up the div, that's what's in the paragraph. It tells you the size, and it has some other things about the code itself. Okay, so let's take another look at this. If we go into Chrome here, I'm expanding this a little bit, and let's go look at the Chrome tools. So if we open up the Chrome tools and we go to Tools here, and we go to Developer Tools like this, notice that it opens up a bunch of stuff here on the bottom, a bunch of useful tools. Now this is just running actually in the browser. This has nothing to do with NetBeans. And you'll see that under the Elements tab here, it's showing me all the raw HTML, but organized in sort of this nice taxonomy that I can collapse and close. Okay, and also it shows me all my doc type and comments and things like that. So this is sort of the source with additional information in there. You can see here's my div with my hello world and my paragraph. And if I mouse over it, you notice that it shows me what it is. Of course, if you want to see a particular thing, you can click on the magnifying glass here and inspect it by just clicking like that. Clicking here and then mousing over it, and it'll show you the particular element that you're looking over. And you can see it shows you the various structure of your page, at least what you're looking at here. But you'll also notice it has the styles. It shows you the body, and the body color is red, and it has some other things, some sort of inherited things. There's a lot of other useful tools here that you'll see in your tutorial. But let's take a look at this in particular. If I click on the This is Dan paragraph, you'll notice that the This is Dan paragraph says that that its paragraph is color blue, and you'll see that the body says color red, and it's has a strike through. Why does it have a strike through? Well, that's because this rule is inherited from body, but it's being overridden by this rule for paragraph. So it says don't use this one, use this one. And that's why cascading style sheets are like that. They're cascade. That it has to do with how things are nested, things get inherited, and it can get quite complicated. Fortunately, if you need to do very complicated cascading style sheets, there's tools that allow you to generate these things, or frameworks that will generate them automatically. So that's about it. It's time for you to go on your own and start going through the various different tutorials, and then do the practice WODs to prepare you for doing the WOD in class. So go forth and have fun, and learn some HTML and CSS, and learn how to use NetBeans a little bit better.